What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares to set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right, welcome back, Nightmare Success In and Out listeners. This is where you come for what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? Well, I've got a great guest here today, and I want to give a shout out to Drew Chapin because he connected Sam Mangel and myself. And if anybody's playing the board game at home, Drew was a guest tech entrepreneur, San Francisco. And actually, he's got one of the top 10 listened podcasts. So you got to check that one out. So Drew he connected Sam and I. And I was just telling Sam before we got on, he's doing such great work. If you haven't been watching the news, if you have been watching the news, you might have seen Sam on quite a few news stations. He got out not too long ago, and he has started a business where he's a federal prison consultant who's doing things that help mitigate the process of the federal criminal justice journey. And he's doing such a good job with them. He's helping CEOs and doctors and politicians and he's foreign nationals, people facing their nightmare. And he's doing an incredible job with it. And I'll tell you, his story is one of those that everybody's fears. 7:00 in the morning, you get a knock on the door, and it's a bunch of FBI agents with windbreakers on, and they come into your house. And Sam had no idea what was going on. They shout out to his wife that they're arresting him, and away he goes in the back of the car. He later finds out it had issues to do with the insurance company that he had sold years prior, and the nightmare began. And Sam ended up supposed to be getting sentencing guidelines of about 18 months. He got 60 months, and that's why he's become such an expert on how in the world does this happen? How do you get into this? How do you get out of it? And who can help you with it? It's Sam. Can't wait to jump into all this. Before we do, I want to recognize the show sponsor, Autoplaza Direct. Who likes spending a couple weekends walking a car lot looking for a car? Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a trip to the dentist. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle of getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They're your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price. They also offer you warranties and financing. It's all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge, the new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Autoplaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Sam Mangel, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sam, your story is one that, like I said at the top, I think that's every citizen's nightmare, isn't it? That you are at home and all of a sudden your world spins into something that feels so out of control. And
there's certain things in life that people remember. They say that those who are not just impacted remember their firstborn. They remember certain monumental days or important days in life. Well, one of the days I remember is that I think it was April 18th of 2016. I had been retired for 4 years and getting a knock on the door of my house, 7 in the morning. I look outside the window and there were, 15, 17 men and women in the blue flak jackets, yellow FBI stencil, carrying shotguns. And
man,
living in South Florida, I opened up the door. I figured, it must be some drug dealer they were looking for.
Wrong address.
Right. I opened up the door and I was, didn't say anything. And they said, Sam Mangel, yes. Within, 2 seconds, they grabbed me by the shirt collar, put me up against the wall, had me handcuffed. Anyone else in the house, any firearms? I think my wife was in the shower. They got her out. put me in the back of the car, drove me to West Palm Beach, didn't tell me anything, couldn't tell me anything, wouldn't tell me anything. I didn't have an attorney. I finally, remember the last words to my wife were, call an attorney, find someone. That was the first $2,500 that I spent to have an attorney at arraignment. And that started at that point a 2-year nightmare
Yeah.
of working my way through the justice system, plopping down that $500,000 for the attorney who guaranteed, promised me, don't
I'll
worry,
take care of you.
I'll take care of you. I can't do this before you're in the bed. And I remember him saying to me, don't worry, I'm always available. And he handed me a piece of paper that had 5 or 7 numbers on it. I think one was, his boat. The other was his daughter's college dorm number. That was on a Friday. On a Monday, I went to call him, and his assistant said, he's not in today. Well, will he call me later? Sure, I'll give him the message. It took until Thursday for him to call me back. And
Wow.
that's when I realized that the nightmare
Yes.
that I was in for.
You were in for it. So Sam, let's go back a little bit. Did you grow up in that area in Florida? Like, what was your life like growing up as a kid? Mom, dad, siblings?
Yeah, I mean, mom and dad, very, very close. My brother's 15 months younger than me. He's a physician in Atlanta, perfectly adjusted public school education in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Graduated, went to my freshman year and part of my sophomore year from where you're from, WashU in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Then I transferred back east to Penn, finished in 85, moved to Hong Kong for about 4 years to work for a family company. Came back within a week.
What was that like? Hong Kong, and what time period was that?
It was before the turnover. It was a British colony, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. I was there before China opened.
Yeah.
I remember going into China for the first time, dirt roads. People had the little Mao Red book that they were giving out. So living in the Orient from 85 to 89, unbelievable experience. What I learned, the culture, and I'd done a lot of traveling growing up with my parents, but living there on my own, I think was probably one of the best experiences of my life. And
so many things have changed with China. I mean, we had a business, and it was like 2004, 5, 6. And I'd go over to Shanghai, and we were treated like rock stars when we arrived, and at that time there was such a different type of vibe of America, China, everybody's growing together, and how things have changed in the last 15 years, that the adversarial approach to where we are now to where we were then.
Well, when I was there, I remember the Chinese and the workers in the factories viewed America as a country paved with gold. The roads were paved with gold, and everybody was friendly, and there wasn't a suspicion. There was a sense of, we're going to get there at some point. Very hardworking, entrepreneurial spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time I was there was 1992 with my son. My son was 6 months old. We took him there, and that's where he learned how to walk. But I have not been there since the handover back to the Chinese.
Yeah.
Dramatic.
And I've got a great grandmother who, before communism, she left with a missionary, came over here to the United States. She thought she was going to Manhattan, meaning New York, and she ended up a little further from Manhattan, Kansas, in Chitopo. So she had quite an eye opening to the United States. But she was an incredible woman, but she never saw her family again. So I always thought that was interesting, how many people were affected by, that whole changeover with China, and how many families didn't, see. I'd love to go back and see relatives that, what are they doing over there now? But that had to be a heck of an experience for you. What old were you in that time period?
I was probably 23 until I was 27. And
Okay.
I remember the first time I
What
went.
a great time to go.
Unbelievable. I was single. It was, I was living in the expat community. I remember the first time I went to China, and as I crossed the border at Lowu, there was a McDonald's, the first McDonald's in Shenzhen, China. And the people had to save weeks and weeks to get a hamburger. And there were lines around the building, around the block to get into it. and that was the spirit,
Yeah.
of the locals, and in the early 80s, it was a completely different, non-confrontational
Yeah.
vibe. And
Yeah.
again, as a single guy, I loved it. There was
Yeah. It
nothing.
had to be great. So you come back from Hong Kong. What's your next step in your life journey there?
Worked for my father's company for a few years, and in 2000, actually 1998, I was approached by, at that point, CNA Life Insurance. I just got my life license, and they were getting into what was called viatical settlements.
Yes. Very
Life,
aware of that. I got a fraternity brother that got into that, and he was in San Francisco, did really well.
right. So terminally ill people. And that's not something that really appealed to me. I felt that it was preying on the terminally ill.
Yeah.
And to me, that was more like vulture capital.
Mm-hmm.
So I approached the actuaries at CNA and said, guys, if you can underwrite mortality for a certain period of time, in that time, I think it was 4 years or less, you can do an extension by, extension risk, and go out to 8 years and 10 years, and still the same underwriting, same discounting procedure. But why not buy policies? It's an asset, a fungible asset, on individuals that were in their 60s and 70s with still a somewhat defined mortality. Maybe they had cardiac issues, diabetes, things that were known to reduce life expectancy,
Mm-hmm.
and present value that asset for them. And CNA loved the idea, and they said, run with it. So from about 2000 until 2010, 11, I became the largest broker of, at that point, it was called life settlements. We weren't really dealing with terminally ill anymore. And we were transacting billions of dollars of this a year. I sold the company in 2011, said to my wife, why don't we move down to South Florida? Why don't we become snowbirds, take a couple months off? And came down here 6 months and loved it.
Mm.
My children were in college at that point. They were in GW. So I said, this is a great opportunity. Came down in month 7 is when, oh gosh, no, it was a couple years later that I remember we just moved to a house and getting that knock on the door. And that's when all the fun started.
Wow. So you really thought that you had accomplished what you were wanting to accomplish in life, that you were going into the slow lane.
I was going to bicycle. I'm an avid cyclist, and I was going to cycle the rest of my life. Every morning, right along the beach, that was my thing. Unbeknownst to me, the only cycling I was going to be doing for 21 months was on one of the spin bikes at the camp in Miami, which, by the way, that was also my job.
That's probably, but that's having a good prison job does help you eat time. Sam, so you get the knock on the door. The world spins out of control. You get an attorney. What, with your family and your friends around, what's going through your mind as you're walking through this?
So I always tell people it's like the 5 stages of grief. The first is denial.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The government's crazy. They don't know what they're doing. I'm going to fight this. This is just absolute lunacy. First attorney I met, who was at my arraignment, said to me, okay, if you want to retain me, it's $100,000. But by the way, I'm not licensed in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, so we have to get another attorney up there for me to appear. And I said, why not just get an attorney up there? That was my first interaction with criminal defense attorneys. After the denial, and I remember on my first meeting with the attorney, I said to him, this is crazy. This is, we're going to fight this.
Yeah.
And that's when he said to me, okay, $500,000, one fee, I'll get you through sentencing. And then don't worry, I'm always here. That's perfect. I'm going to do this. It's worth it. That was on a Friday. Check cleared on Saturday. I didn't speak to him for 6 more days. But my natural reaction was the first stage of grief, denial. This couldn't have happened. It's not possible. Not me. And the attorney in my first meeting said something, used the term mens rea.
Yes.
Why did I know or have knowledge of what I was doing? Now, my situation was, I'm going to say, might have been different from others in that it had happened. The statute of limitations was running out 2 weeks before I was arraigned or charged or arrested.
That's interesting.
But I didn't know that they had a sealed indictment for almost 6 months prior to that.
Okay.
During when I met the attorney and he showed me the reams and the amount of information, I said, "Well, explain to me where this came from." And he said, "Well, did you have a employee?" And at the time, I had 150 employees.
Mm-hmm.
"Did you have an employee named Joe?" I said, "Sure. He was my senior manager of one of the divisions." Well, Joe was arrested in 2011 for a state drug charge in New Jersey. Joe made a deal with the prosecutors in New Jersey that he could bring a bigger fish to the table, which was me. No matter how you look at it, right, wrong, or indifferent, it was my company. The benefits inured to me, and my wife owned one of the companies. And when my attorney said, if we don't do something quickly or you don't settle this, they're going to bring your wife into it.
Yeah. And that's chapter and verse. I mean, that's something that's in the playbook.
And I said, well, she had nothing to do with it. She just owned it in name only. She was not an active participant. Doesn't matter. That's what they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when denial turned to anger
mm-hmm.
and frustration.
Mm-hmm.
How could they do this? And I remember the attorney said, you're dealing with the 800-pound gorilla. They win 98% of their cases. Let me negotiate. And this was after my check clear. And we're not at that point. He said, let me negotiate the best possible plea for you. Don't worry. You're never going to serve a day.
Mm-hmm.
I promise you. Words to live by.
Yeah.
And he said, give me a couple months. That was, say, June of 2016. It took about a year and a half for the plea to be negotiated. Finally, he negotiated the plea. Don't worry. Great plea. You have roughly 12 points on this point chart, which I knew nothing about. You're never going to serve a day. Did my pre-sentence report, didn't explain anything to me about my pre-sentence interview. Don't worry, we'll have dinner afterwards.
And let's talk about that a little bit, Sam, because there's a lot of people that listen to this that, or some people know about that pre-sentence report and some people don't. That's maybe one of the most important things that you have in your world, going from that moment when you do that to sentencing, to your case manager, to the probation office when you get out. What is that?
That's the Bible. That is your Bible from the day of the interview into the day you end supervised release. That document is not only chances are the only document that your judge will ever read about you. Because I tell clients all the time, the judge typically sees you 2 times.
Mm-hmm.
One, first day is your change of plea, because usually your arraignment is a magistrate.
Yeah. Your
change of plea, and the day of sentencing. And the day of sentencing, the judge has 5 other people being sentenced. You're just a number. So he reads this document, this
3-ring binder,
right, about you, and that tells your life story. It tells your education, how you grew up, your criminal history, your charges. But that document is a direct reflection of how the judge sees you, how your case manager in prison sees you, how your counselor, if you go to a halfway house, how supervised release. That tells you if you're a risk. Are you, do you have substance abuse issues? What's your family life like? Everything. And if you don't help to create the narrative of that document, unlike what I did, the fallout can be so vicious and problematic, not only in terms of sentence length. It could cause the judge to see you in such a negative way, like myself, that it increases your sentence length. It could potentially decrease the amount of non-custodial halfway house home confinement time you have.
Yeah.
And how much freedom and liberty you get from supervised release. And if I can share how mine went.
Yes, please do.
Exactly what your guests and viewers should not do. So I went into my meeting and my attorney said, don't worry, it'll be over in a half hour. We'll have dinner and drinks afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And during the interview, the young lady, who I'm sure was a very nice person, asked me a question. And one of the questions was about a trust that I had. And I felt that it wasn't her business to know about an irrevocable trust that I technically didn't own. So I said, it's none of your business. And she looked at me and said, what do you mean it's none of my business? I'm entitled to everything. And my attorney didn't say anything. And I took the position, it's none of her business. She said, we'll call the judge. The judge said on a speaker, whatever her name was, really, it is none of our business at this point. And I felt a victory, man. I got
Got it.
I won, and I beat the government. And we started talking about things like, was I drinking or if I had done drugs? And I said, ma'am, I hadn't done drugs since the late 70s, early 80s, since college. Drinking, yeah, you kidding me? I drink like fish. Who wouldn't, given the stress and strain I'm under? And she said to me, well, is it a problem? And I said, well, not so much for me, but it is for my wife. And the only thing I'm thinking of is I got to get out of here and have a drink.
Yeah.
And I didn't know why she was asking me about this. My attorney, who promised me probation, never told me about the RDAP drug and alcohol program and why she was asking me that. But fortunately, I answered that question honestly, but without knowing the significance of it.
Mm-hmm.
Day of sentencing, I turn up and that interviewer was sitting there, and unbeknownst to me, she was the judge's favorite employee. And she smiled at me, and she had the last laugh. And I remember, and we'll kind of skip ahead to the day of sentencing, and my attorney got up and said their piece. Prosecutor got up and recommended 12 months non-custodial, followed by 3 years or 2 years of probation. And it was my turn. And I was still mad as hell at the judge and said what I did to the judge in the court. And the judge, and this is one of those things you'll remember. Judge looked down on me, and this was a particularly difficult judge, well known for this. Looked down and said, Mr. Mangel, you are no different than any vagrant on the street. You are actually worse. Clearly, you came from a better background than many people who stand in front of me, yet you do not understand the gravity of your situation. You clearly accept no responsibility, show no remorse for what you did or your victims. That diatribe went on for 20 minutes. And afterwards, he said, I'm going to do something I rarely do. I'm deviating from guidelines or recommendation, and I'm giving you a sentence of 60 months. And I looked down. I thought he said 6. I looked down at my attorney, who wrote 60. Last time I ever saw my attorney, 60 on his legal pad. And then I remember the first thing I thought of, wow, I'm going to be in prison for 4 years and 2 months, 85%. And he remanded me to custody.
Oh, man.
Which is not done often.
No.
And I went into the bowels of the Philadelphia Detention Center. And I can share that story now if you want.
Yeah.
I remember going down into a holding pen with 20 other inner city inmates, defendants from Philadelphia. And I was the only, 54-year-old white Jewish guy, bald with glasses that walked in. And they quickly got me up to my floor. And they gave me a bedroll. And they said, you're in cell 31B or something, or upper. And I remember going to my cell, and it was a young man, 30 years old, with 2 teardrops. And he's looking at me, and nothing was said. And we're talking, and 30 minutes later, another inmate came to the door and just shook his head like this and left. And that's when I realized, wait, these guys have phones. They know that I'm not a sex offender. Because that, when a young or an older white guy comes in and it's remanded to custody, usually it's a sex offense or some form of violence. It's not a white collar crime.
Right.
That's when that 30-year-old who was there for 30 years to life, fentanyl, said to me, I never met a Jew before. And the only thing I could think of saying was, wow, I never met a gang member before. And I figured, if he didn't stab me then, I was going to make it.
You were going to survive.
Yeah, and that started my 6 weeks at the detention center before, I took the bus.
Oh, man. And I talked about this, Sam, when we were talking on the phone, is that is the worst of detention is that jail piece, when it's so transitory. Somebody could be there for a DWI or somebody that could have killed somebody. Everybody's thrown into the same thing. Most people don't ever go outside. They're stuck in this pod. And I mean, it's like shock treatment. And you went directly into that, totally unplanned. I can't imagine, because I'm sure the conversation you had with your wife going into that courtroom, you were not thinking that was the last conversation you were going to have before you were remanded to custody.
I took my daughter to work that day, and I said to her, Callie, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? Because after this is over, any restaurant you want to go, we'll go for dinner. Unbeknownst to me, my dinner was going to be a bologna sandwich. in the holding center of the Philadelphia Detention Center.
So let's talk about that 6 weeks, because what kind of communication are you having with your attorney or anyone in that world of what happens next? Because that's you've entered into the unknown world immediately. And when you get into that, the worst thing you want is to travel as a prisoner, which you're automatically, signed up for when they do that to you. Otherwise, you have a voluntary, surrender to that prison they give you a date and time, and you show up at the gate and say, "I'm here." That's not your world of what you went through, Sam.
So I learned quickly what to say, what not to say, and to kind of hide behind my cellie, my roommate. He was the king of the pod. Clearly, it was a more senior gang member. And I tried to be as low key as possible. I never talked to my attorney again. Had no communication, but on the first night, I called my wife and I said, appeal. The first thing that people think about after they get to prison or they're sentenced is an appeal. Somebody got it wrong. My attorney got it wrong, or the judge got it wrong, appeal. Because that's the last vestige of hope, is an appeal. And people don't realize what goes into it and the likelihood or not of success.
And money.
Oh, so it was another $50,000 on an appeal attorney, and same treatment where I had to deal with him in Philadelphia. I didn't know that I wasn't going to stay at the detention center for the length of my sentence, or I thought maybe they were going to transfer me to a local prison. While I was there, it was they had violence. There's no question about it. There was quite a bit of tension on the floor. I saw an inmate get stabbed, and you learn very quickly how to stay out of things. But I also remember one thing about being in a cell is the jingle of the keys. That's how you know the door's being locked at night, and that's how you know when you're being let out for either after count or in the morning. And you'll pay attention because there are no clocks, there are no alarms. It's the jingle of the keys. And I can't imagine being in a higher level institution for a long sentence, because that is the only thing that is with regularity, is the jingle of the keys. And it was a great feeling when I finally got down to the camp in Miami not to hear that anymore.
So how did you get transported down there?
One afternoon, they called me and said, pack up. Well, in the detention center, I didn't have much to pack up. Right. And I said, where am I going? We can't tell you. I said, what do you mean? I have to tell my wife. What do you mean you can't tell me? So a counselor said to me, pulled me aside. I said, I think you're going to Miami. I said, Miami? Well, I had been a resident of Florida, and I didn't understand how the BOP functioned and how designation worked. So I said, no, I can't go to Miami. My appeal's being heard up here. I need to go to a place closer. There was no discussing. And my cellmate said to me, you're going to a camp, right? And I said, I hope. Asked to be a bus orderly. And I said, what is it? He said, trust me, asked to be a bus orderly because you're minimum security. So I went downstairs the following morning at 4:00, or you're in a long line of inmates going on a bus that has rails and bars on the outside. And they stand everybody in line, put you in a polyester jumpsuit, and they start shackling you. And they shackle your feet and they shackle your hands, but they also put you in a black box in front of you so you have no way of moving your hands. And I said to the marshal, I'm going to a camp. I'd like to be an orderly. He said, well, how do you know about that? And I said, I don't, but I was asked. He said, okay, you're the orderly. I said, this is great. We're getting on a bus now. It was a Thursday morning. I'll be in Miami by Friday night. Perfect. And I'll be an orderly. So the only thing in the orderly is your hands weren't shackled, but your legs were. And when they march you on the bus, they assign the seating. And I was the person to give out water and food to the people on the bus.
What a great thing to get as advice from your cellmate.
And I thought, this is perfect. It's 19 hours to Miami. I'll deal with it. Till I realized that's not how the BOP transports people. It's called diesel therapy. So the first stop we had was Washington, D.C. to pick up and drop off people. Then we stopped at Petersburg, Virginia, where they said, get off. I said, I'm not getting off. I'm going to Miami. Get off the bus. Got to be a mistake. Maybe they want to clean the bus. It shows you how diluted my mindset
Sure.
was. Got off the bus and they marched us into Petersburg, where they re-stripped us, gave us a bag of bologna, and put us in a cell. And they put me in a cell with somebody, I don't remember who it was, for 5 days. And that cell, thank God, had a shower, but I couldn't get my wife. My wife didn't know where I was. She just knew I wasn't in the system anymore. 2 weeks later, after going to Petersburg, Atlanta, which is the worst facility I could ever imagine. It's a United States penitentiary.
I've heard about it.
Where I was housed with a individual, a legal immigrant, medium security, that couldn't sleep, and he would walk the cell at night, and that was scary. 5 days later, we went to Tallahassee. We were for one night. Finally, 2 weeks later on a Friday, got to the camp in Miami. And I
Have you ever talked to your wife through this whole process?
One time in Atlanta, I was allowed to use the phone. It cut off after about a minute. So that was it. Got to Miami.
Wow.
I'm thinking, this is perfect. I'm in Miami. I can see the camp next door. No wires. Guys are outside. They're running the track. Guard said to me, come inside. I went inside to R&D, the reception, and he said, Mangel, you're in the SHU. I said, SHU? Is that a unit? He said, no, we don't have your paperwork. I said, I've been on the bus for 2 weeks. How could you not have my paperwork? Sorry. They put me in the SHU for the weekend, which was pure hell. It was 2 nights of banging and yelling. Finally got out of the SHU on a Monday morning, went across the street, and I was in the camp where I spent 21 months roughly of my 60-month sentence.
Wow, Sam, what an entry into the world of prison. I mean, I didn't know that story. That you talking about hardcore entry therapy.
It was.
I mean, when you got to that camp, I'm sure you felt like, I'm in prison, but okay.
Well, so the first night, an older gentleman said to me, am I there for RDAP? I said, what's RDAP? I didn't know what RDAP was. Remember, I was getting probation. He explained to me what RDAP was, and I remembered saying in my pre-sentence interview that, yeah, I drink a lot. And back then, Miami was actively seeking participants to the program.
They needed people in the program, yeah.
So I went the next day and I applied. That was May of 2018. They put me in the August class, and I completed the class there. What was interesting is I remember about 2 weeks into my stay in Miami, another older gentleman came running down the hallway. President Trump is closing all the camps. Big budget change. That's where I got exposed to inmate.com. I'm so excited. And I ran to the phone and I called my wife and I said, Candy, you're going to have to come pick me up in a couple of days. Trump is closing all the camps. She said, really? Yeah, really. This guy just said it. Well, I didn't know that inmate.com existed and all the wishful thinking goes along with it. So in many ways, it was diesel therapy. It was shock therapy, all in a very short period of time.
Wow. So you get into this unknown world where you're going to be spending however long that you start mitigating your situation, but how did you have any strategies at all going, Sam, into that crazy unknown world? Or did you just walk in after spending the time that you spent getting there? Were you in shock, worn out, or you were thinking, okay, this is a recharge. Let me figure out how I'm going to live here?
The latter. I think that I was exhausted from the 8-week experience. And at that point, keep in mind, there was no First Step Act. That didn't pass until the end of 18. And I didn't know about RDAP. So when I got into RDAP, I realized, okay, well, that's 1 year that's going to come off of my, 4-year and 2-month sentence. But
which is a huge thing. I mean, even when you go in and you have to do your interview or whatever there at the prison, you don't know for sure until it shows up that, yes, you've got accepted, and it shows up in your release date that they've knocked a year off, which is huge. When you're looking at you and I both had 60 months and you can count that any way you want to, but it's not, it's 60 months.
Yeah, and I remember when that year came off, and I called my wife and I said, it's now down to about 37 months roughly. Again, still, and it came off before the First Step Act still, but it wasn't until COVID hit that things started to change. And I'm a big fan of telling people when they enter prison, you want to be a little fish in a big pond, because especially in camps, guys are all still living what they perceive to be a dream.
Mhm.
A lot of guys were very successful and lost it all. For instance, the only person that I was considered somewhat friendly with in the camp in Miami was Peter Madoff, Bernie's brother. Great guy.
Mhm.
We used to walk the track at night. And a lot of the white collar inmates there wound up losing everything. And they
Mhm.
still live the life of, well, when this is over, a helicopter's going to pick me up and take me to my Gulf Stream. And there's, in many ways, almost psychosis. And
Mhm.
you can't really call people out on it. You just shake your head and okay. But what I wanted to do was not only be quiet and kind of a wallflower, but
Mhm.
also I always tell people, know your audience, know the counselor, know the case manager, and in my case, know the warden. If I can tell a story, as a
Yeah.
cyclist, maybe a couple months into it, I was out back. I was always the first one up in the morning, 5 o'clock. And in Miami, the spin bikes, which were old Schwinn bikes, they weren't the new bikes you see now, were underneath a pavilion, and there were some TVs outside. So I was out back. One day, 6 o'clock in the morning, the warden walked up to me with his administrative assistant, and he said, I always see you out here by yourself in the morning. Have you been riding for a while? And I said, yes, this is my passion. I really enjoy riding. It was right around the Tour de France of 2018. And he said, well, let me tell you, I'm a new rider and I got this bike and it's just not fitting me well. And I don't know what it is. Maybe you'd be willing to give me some suggestions. I said, sure. He said, well, I'll bring the bike in tomorrow and I'll put your name on a call out and you'll hear your name paged because my office is in the low next door. His office is in the camp. Can you come over and help me with the bike? Sure. I didn't, no reason not to. Till one of the older inmates that had been through the system for many years said to me, "Are you talking to the warden?" I said, "Yeah, he came up. You can't talk to the warden." So why? The guy just came up to me about cycling. If anybody sees you talking to the warden, they're going to
Thinking you're a
or a
snitch.
snitch, and it's a problem. I said, "Look, it's not my problem. I don't care what you guys do, and I'm going to talk to the warden." Went in the next day. My name was called out and escorted me because you have to go through security into his office.
Mhm.
And there's a big box of Dunkin' Donuts and Dunkin' Coffee, and a TV was turned on to the Tour de France. And then at that point, I figured, all right, I can make it through this. So I helped the warden for this bike. He said, if you want to come back the next couple of days to watch the tour, you can. I appreciate your help. Okay. When I went back that night, the same inmate who threatened me said to me, hey, and I must have mentioned I was going back, any chance you can find something out for me? Whatever it was, he asked. I said, well, so you want me to ask the warden a favor for you? He said, that would be
Uh-huh.
really cool. Sure, I'll ask for you. Well, all of a sudden now guys are coming up and saying, hey, can you find something out from the warden? But the warden said to me towards the end of that 2 weeks, listen, if there's anything I can do for you that's appropriate, not illegal or anything, I'd be more than happy to try. I remember in October of 2019, the case manager called me in and gave me my release paperwork and said I was getting 6 to 9 months halfway house. I was being released July of 2020. And I remember I could get 12 months. That's what you're allowed on a 60-month sentence with home confinement. And I remember the warden said, well, if there's anything I could do for you, I emailed the warden. Do you remember you said that to me? Can I meet with you? Yes. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, I get paged into the case manager's office. And this was a really angry case manager. She did not like me. I don't think she liked any white collar guys. She said,
Mhm.
Mangel, you went over my head. And I said, yeah, I did, because I was entitled to 12 months. You got your 12 months. And a lot of expletives between you went over my head and
Yeah.
you got your 12 months, handed it to me. I never want to see you here again. Okay, that's it. I walked back out. Never had to see her again, but I got my 12 months. So reading your crowd and knowing you're in jail,
Mhm.
you're with 85% of the people have nothing, have no money,
Mhm.
and everybody has a hustle. Understanding your environment, and what really got me into this was I saw guys with charges greater than mine, guidelines greater than mine, that had sentences well under mine, that knew about RDAP. I remember saying to a couple of them, how did you know this? Did your attorney? My attorneys knew nothing. We hired a consultant, and they gave me a name of a couple of different consultants. And I remember saying to my wife and daughter when they came to visit, because they kept saying, what are you going to do when you get out? I'm going to help people. I'm going to be a consultant. And my daughter was livid. She thought, you have to stay away from this business, this industry. Why would you want to stay immersed in something this horrible? And I said, because I think I can help people and I understand the system. And I got out and I interviewed 4 or 5 companies, wound up going with one of the larger companies in the country. Left them after about 2 years because of a difference of opinion, and started my own, I guess, in December of 22, and never looked back.
It's a great story, Sam. And you and I talked a little bit about this because it's reentry is hard, but one of the things I think is so great about your story is that you are who you are now. You were a successful entrepreneur, successful business. You got taken down a track that you never thought you'd be down, but they didn't take your brain.
Right.
You're using that for the experience that you've had from the time that you went to Hong Kong to the time that you got out of prison and what you've experienced. And that can help so many people in so many ways. And I think that's the thing that, I find, I think I've been out 7 years is when you first get out, it's kind of like you have to find your sea legs. It's like, oh my God, I'm out. And, you come out with this gusto, I'm going to conquer the world, but you do find and can find your passion, and I think that's why you are have done so well in a short amount of time is a passion. You get filled up with that. You get, and one of the things you told me is it's not about money to you. It's a lot of the things you do. You make money doing this, but you also just help people.
Sure.
And you balance that out, and it's a needed thing. People are scared to death in this environment of the criminal justice system. And somebody who truly has good intentions to help someone can be a lifesaver, can actually save someone's life. Because a lot of people can get indicted and they think, I'm ending it. And if they have somebody that's holding their hand and says, no, you can survive this, and this is how you survive, that's what you're offering people, is to walk beside them and give them what they need.
As I told you when we first spoke, 85% of my practice is therapy. It's about telling a client, their spouse, their children, their parents, hey, I'm available 7 days a week. And I don't tell you that because I expect you to call me 7 days a week, but you're going to get scared on a Saturday night because you watched Orange is the New Black or Oz. And the fear of the unknown and the opaqueness of prison is what really causes a lot of turmoil and strife within families. And if I could bring down the temperature so much to where the family is ready for it and understands it, and they don't have to be happy about it, but they're emotionally, physically, psychologically ready for it, and understands what they're getting into. I remember when I first got out and the company I worked for said, you can't do this. You have to be behind the scenes. You need permission from your supervisor release officer. And I went to him and I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, yep, you got it. No problem. And what's interesting now is this coming Saturday, I'm going back to the camp in Miami to visit my client who's there. And I got permission. So when I filled out the visitor form and I emailed it to the counselor, you have to indicate, are you a felon and who was your supervised release? And I had to indicate it all. And he got back to me and said, yep, you can come. So my family's saying, why would you want to go back? It's because I know what it's like sitting on that bench in a green outfit and waiting for the vending machine line. And when I tell people this is going to be a blip in time and it's going to be over. And what really upsets me is when people say to me, well, what am I going to do when I'm out? Or I have no future. And they have a family to support. And I say, I just want to smack them in the head and say, stop it. You were successful before. Whatever you did, you were successful. You might not be able to practice medicine or law again, but the knowledge that you had that made you successful will make you successful again.
And something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've helped people get jobs in car dealers, and they're now the manager of the dealership. So
Right.
it's not, oh, woe is me. What am I going to? No, guess what? You have mouths to feed. You have a responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
You have victims you have to repay. So stop with the pity party. Let's figure out a plan. And my mentality is, as a consultant, 15% of what I do is projects,
Mm-hmm.
helping people with the interviews and different specific projects. 85% of my time is talking to them and helping them get through from step to step to step. I get 50 emails a day from clients in custody with different things. The funniest is I heard that new criminal justice and 50%. That's okay. I went through
Mm-hmm.
that. So being a consultant is not about writing a narrative for somebody or a fancy release plan. It's about helping somebody understand the situation they're in and get through it, because it will end.
No, and what you just said there is so powerful, because it's a mindset, and you're taking them from, if they have a victim mentality, you're bringing them over to the side of a survivor mentality, and that's how they will get through it. I want to talk to you about too is one of your takeaways through this, but I want to recognize Nightmare Success Podcast is sponsored by the White Collar Support Group. It's the world's first support group devoted to people navigating the white collar criminal justice system. I'm a member of the White Collar Support Group, and I can tell you this is a bunch of people who help each other through the criminal justice journey for free. Whether you're just starting your journey or you've made it through to the other side, this is a great space for you. Come join us on Zoom, Mondays, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. For information, go to prisonist.org. That's prisonist.org. Start here. So, Sam, when you first started, because the other thing I love about what you're doing, I just happened to see you, and I think it was on CNN. When I'm at home, I'll put up all 4 screens with my YouTube TV so I can see all the different networks. And you popped up, I think, on the CNN square. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And what I love also about what you do is you're a great voice for the justice impacted community. You do a great job being, a consultant for someone individually. What I also love is that you get on and you're a great voice for us. And by you being one of us and being seen and talking and communicating, it's breaking a narrative in a sense, that whatever that narrative thing is that is brought on by an ex-felon, the way you present yourself, the way you talk, and the way that you present the community is also creating its own path. And I know that and I know you're probably aware of that, but that is a big part of the reentry community. Is we all have to break the narrative, because we all carry that extra scarlet letter on our forehead that we're going to be an ex-felon for the rest of our lives. But that's how we handle it, by overcoming and carrying that weight and finding a new path and getting your passion, doing whatever, and helping break the narrative that all of us go back to prison. Everybody's, a lost cause. And I think that's one of the great things about what you're doing. Love the consulting, love the mitigation, but the fact that you're on TV and you're doing the things that you're doing helps the overall community. So it's also a big deal.
And I tell everybody, don't let the scarlet letter define who you are. If you do,
Right.
you're doomed to fail. But if you
Yep.
say to yourself, yes, I had an issue, I've overcome the issue, that's not who I am now, and move on. As a father, a husband, and a member of my community, I have a responsibility to a lot more than just myself. If I was selfish and worried about myself only, then I could sit and wallow in my own pity. But that's not how
Right.
life goes, and that's not how responsible people should live their lives. And
Yeah.
I tell anyone that's going through this, or their family, that it's a hiccup.
That's another point I don't want to just brush over. You and your family survived. Your family stayed intact, and it was a nightmare. And it's something that the whole family goes through. It's not just you, the whole family experiences this nightmare and they figure out how to get through it. I also see that as something you help people with, because the saddest thing that I ever saw in prison is seeing people lose everything in their family. Those are really, really dark days. And if we can do anything in our world of helping families try to stay together, that's a huge thing for people to navigate through. But if it can be done, I think it's a game changer in the
I was
end.
just married 35 years, and my wife is a frequent speaker of spouses that are
Mm,
going through this. And I always tell the spouse, you can talk to clergy, you can talk to support groups, you can talk to friends or family, but there's nothing like talking to someone who's gone through it and come out the other end successful. And my
yep.
wife often tells people the worst experience of this is when I came home and she lost the TV pusher at night. Okay, in hindsight, if that's the worst thing, we can deal with it.
Well, and I so identify with that. I had a wife that I always say that she should have worn a cape for the superhero status that she had 3 daughters, and I think the way they got through it was looking at her as a role model of how she got through it. And she was one of the wives that showed up every week, and that's how we stayed plugged in. And it was a 4.5 hour drive one way, and those things that spouses do when we're in is remarkable. It really is.
She held down the fort.
It really
And
is.
like she tells me, before this happened, she never opened the checkbook, ever, never paid a
Yeah.
bill.
My wife didn't either. Now she only does the
That's
checkbooks and
exactly
the
right.
bills.
She never
And I
did
said,
all.
that's great. I never liked that.
You learn very quickly, and it's an unfortunate way to learn, but
Yeah.
we learn.
Yeah. I always ask people this question, Sam, and I'm curious what your answer is on what do you think is your greatest takeaway through all of this that you've experienced?
A certain probably sense of humility and uh, a loss of arrogance, because
Mm,
that experience is humbling.
so humbling.
When you're told lights go on at 6 in the morning, everyone wears the same color, eats the same meal, has the same amount of money every month to spend. I think it's not only humbling, but it gives me a new way to. I'm a lot less judgmental of people,
Yep.
and much more forgiving to family and to anybody, because people are not perfect. Inherently, we make mistakes, some worse than others, and mistakes have consequences. And I don't feel that you can judge someone necessarily by the mistakes that they made, especially if they take the action to either correct it, own it, and move forward. Um, and that's
Absolutely. That's
really what I've
great.
learned.
That's a great takeaway. And it's so true. It opens up your eyes to so many things. Sam, if people want to get a hold of you, where do they go? Is it
No,
sammengel.com?
actually, interesting story. The former firm that I worked with bought my name for a domain name, so you can't use Sam Mangel. I actually take that an honor. They bought my name.
Backhanded
Right.
compliment, sure.
So it's sam-mangel.com. You can Google Sam Mangel, or they can, just look me up, call me. The best place is just to Google.
You have a YouTube channel
I have a
too.
YouTube channel, but just now you can Google Sam Mangel and it doesn't go to my former firm's website.
I love it. I love it. And for any of you out there, I know that you had to have gotten something from this today because Sam's got one heck of a story with a lot of nuggets of wisdom. Follow, subscribe, share. It's a big deal. Comment. Um, hey, if you're looking for a book out there, I've got one, Nightmare Success, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Go check that out. I know it's a hassle, but if you got time, it puts the show on steroids. If you leave a review on Apple, it does something to the show and it's a really good thing. If you want to find me, it's brentcassidy.com. I spell it wrong. It's with a TY, not a DY. Sam, thanks so much for being on. I loved your story. I'm a big fan of yours, and I wish you the best of everything that you're
Thank you for
doing.
the opportunity.
Nightmare Success, in and out. Oh, and as I always used to say when I was writing my emails back and forth, stay strong. I'll do the same. See y'all later.